Okay, now I'm recording. So you are absolutely welcome to attend all of the score study sessions in phase two. Of course, there are a couple of sessions where are much more specific. So we have two masterclass sessions, one for the Vivaldi with the symphony, where a lutenist guitarist is giving a public masterclass. So everybody who's playing in the Vivaldi in CSO should be there, but it's basically a public masterclass. But I do also think we can gain a lot from watching other people being taught on a particular thing. Those of you assigned to the Mahler, the principal horn player of the National Symphony, Abel Pereira, will be here talking about Mahler, but also giving a masterclass to Adam Ziccardi, who will be playing the first horn part with us. So if you're assigned to Mahler, then please do come to that session, and that'll be sort of a required session for everybody assigned to Mahler. So is that kind of clear in terms of when you should attend and when you don't have to, because it's optional because you're not assigned to that particular piece? Is that clear? Okay, all right. What I've also done is I've set up a resource link for each of the pieces that we're doing, as well as a folder that has the score and parts. So Brett, is Brett here? Yeah, Brett has been working. He was in the music building until very late last night, making copies, scanning the parts and scores. So a big thanks to Brett for making those ready. The Mahler parts have not arrived yet. There was a problem with the payment. So as soon as that gets here, Brett will be once again working very hard late into the night hours for us.
Chris, I actually did find some Mahler parts in the library that we have currently. I could use those, or should I just wait for the parts that we already
No, because the wind parts are completely different. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So you'll just be wasting your effort. So just wait till because I just got confirmation that it was mailed out this morning. There was a problem with the payment that wasn't made in time. So anyway, let me share before I share the screen, I just want to make sure everybody was able to get to those links, the resource links for the different pieces, like the Copland and Mahler resource link on Canvas. Yes, give me a thumbs up. Okay, it's troubling that I don't see everybody's thumbs up. So it was sent out on Canvas as an announcement, not only the phase 2 and 3 schedule, but the actual links to the score and parts. So there's a folder for the parts. The scores, that's going to get there soon, okay? But in terms of the parts, the Mahler, Copland, and Florence Price should be all set. And you should all have links to that. And then I also set up a what's called a resource list for each of the pieces. So let me share the screen with you, because it needs a little more explanation than maybe it wasn't quite as clear. All right, so what I've set up is this resource list. And what I've asked you to do is to do two things. Of course, explore the resource, going to the links directly and reading it, the article or the video. But also, I've asked you to put the resource, whoever was the person that put up the resource, right? And then what you can do is, I'm asking you each to put up a resource that you found that is not on this list so far, and then sign your initials, right? And then what everybody will do is they will also review 3 of them and give a sort of thumbs up or down as a comment. So if you, let's say, this video, right, and you would put a comment, right, and then and say, I found this not useful or useful, right? And then you would leave that comment there. And then that will sort of give us a running tabs of the usefulness of each resource, right? So hopefully that what I'm trying to do is create a resource list that's not specific to just this concert period, but that can be used further on down the road, not just by our orchestra, but other orchestras as well as they tackle this piece, okay? So some of the things I've created, I'll go over in the presentation that I'll do, okay? Any questions on the resource list and the parts link? Okay, Brett will also be making a physical copy of it. So if you want to have a physical copy of the music, that'll also be available and that'll be ready to pick up at a later time. And I'll send out an announcement when it is ready. Okay, huge thanks to Brett for doing all of this work. We couldn't do it without Brett's help. One more sort of logistics. When we begin in-person rehearsals on March 30th in Klarman Hall, there's a question from Michael. What do we see? Which section is we? Yeah. Let me get to that in a second. Let me just address the logistics of the Phase 3 rehearsal in Klarman. When we begin rehearsals in Klarman Hall, I'm still trying to negotiate whether we can use the storage space in Klarman Hall so that we won't have to carry stands and percussion and keyboards and all of that every rehearsal. I basically made that a stipulations, but we're just trying to get clearance of whether we can sort of take over the storage space that is in Klarman. So I'll have more updates on that. Hopefully that'll be approved so that we don't have to move anything into Klarman for each rehearsal. All right, all the stands will be there, the chairs will be there. So how we are spacing out in Klarman is that on Tuesdays we're basically working on Mahler for two half-hour sessions, and Thursdays we'll be working on Copland and Price. And there's a very particular way in which we'll have to do logistics in terms of we'll use one door to enter only and then one door to exit. And then each rehearsal, we're allowed to have a 30-minute slot, and then we have to empty the room for 30 minutes so the air can circulate. And then we have another half-hour slot. So in Klarman, we're scheduled for 4 to 6, but that does not mean we're going to begin rehearsals at 4, right? Because I'm trying to stay as close to the original 4:45, 6:45 time slot as possible. And some of you have labs ending at 4:25. So what is going to happen is because there's a prelim in Klarman at 6:30, we had to vacate the room by 6. So they gave us a 4 to 6 2-hour time slot. So that means we will begin setup at 4. So please do come and help set up and get your individual stand from the storage case, and then go to our social distancing slots of a 12-foot radius. Even though for winds and keyboards, strings and keyboards, it's 6-foot radius that is recommended. We're actually going further than that and doing a 12-foot radius for everybody in the ensemble. Okay. Of course, you have to mask and all of that. This is not. This is still going through the process of facilities, but most likely you may have to go through 3 times a week check rather than 2 times. So all the athletic teams are doing that, the Greek societies are doing that, and we will most likely be put in that category where we have to do more testing each week. Okay. All right. And then each day on Tuesday and Thursday in Klarman, 4 to 4:30 will be set up. 4:30 to 5 will be our first half-hour chunk of rehearsal in Klarman. Then we'll have a 5 to 5:30 where we empty out, go get coffee, or we can actually sit in the area and talk about whatever passages we worked on and things like that. And then 5:30 to 6, we go back in and have the second half-hour rehearsal. So each day we only have 30-minute plus 30-minute on Tuesday and 30-minute plus 30-minute on Thursday. Normally in a concert block, we would have 2 hours each day. Well, actually, it's more like 4:45 to 6:15 and then 4:45 to 6:45 on Thursdays, right? So it's a much more constricted, contracted time of rehearsal that we have. So I'm going to really ask you to, the principle in the past was for every minute of rehearsal, you should spend an equivalent minute outside of rehearsal preparing for that minute of rehearsal, right? I'm going to actually be asking you for every minute of rehearsal, maybe spend 2 minutes, right? So if we have a 30 plus 30, 1 hour of rehearsal on Tuesday and 1 hour on Thursday, then you should be spending at least twice the amount of that time looking at fingerings, practicing, listening to recordings, reading the resources, and those things. Otherwise, we're not going to make it, because if you just rely on, well, I'll practice in rehearsal. That is not going to happen, right? So if we're not all committed to having a high level of preparation coming into the rehearsal, we're going to be in a very low level of activity. Okay, so starting from March 30, we're going to have rehearsals. Tuesdays are Mahler, Thursdays are Copland and Florence Price, and we will continue in this way. And then our performance date is the weekend of May 8 and 9. Now, they have not given us clearance for an audience. So our performance on those days, it'll actually be more like 2 sets of recording sessions. But it's not going to be the kind of recording sessions where we cut and paste like snippets. I'm not interested in doing that. So I want to actually have a sustained real-time performance all the way through. We may have a shot at doing 2 or 3 takes over the 2-day period, but I'm not really interested in having, like, we do like 12 bars, got it, another 12 bars. We're not going to do that kind of recording, but it will be a recording session that'll be put together with multiple video angles and then broadcast. And our video editor, Paul Acosta, who will be doing that editing for us, he'll need some time to put it together. So most likely it'll be maybe 3 or 4 days after May 9 that our performance will be broadcast. Okay. Any questions regarding phase 3 rehearsal process and all of that?
Oh, I had a question about like the concert.
Yeah.
So is it not going to be like we go on stage and perform and there's a live stream and people just tune in?
No. It'll be our performance will be a pre-recorded performance that'll be broadcast at 3 or 4 days later than our 2 sessions that we spend on May 8 and May 9. All right. So actually, our dress rehearsal on May 8 Saturday, that'll actually we will all need to be in concert dress. So we will in some ways have 2 sets of again. We're limited to 30-minute and 30-minute with a 30-minute separation, right? So most likely Saturday we'll spend both half hours recording Mahler, right? And then Sunday we'll spend both half hours recording Copland, and hopefully the Florence Price will be easy enough to do in 1 take. Does that make sense? Right. So you can't really depend on, I'll be ready for the dress rehearsal and we'll really work out the kinks. No, Saturday, May 8 is basically our performance for Mahler, right? And Sunday, May 9 is our performance for Copland, right? So we got to really be ready to do that. All right. And then, so that's a good question, but to be clear, that's what's going to be happening. Okay, Billy? All right. All right. I'm going to launch into my presentation. So if you have any more questions, I'll stay on the call after the presentation. Okay, here we go. All right. Hang on. Okay. Yeah. Can you see okay? Can you guys give me a thumbs up if you see everything?
Oh, yeah, we can see it. Oh,
okay.
I can see it.
All right. Excellent. Okay. So Copland is probably one of my all-time favorite pieces in the orchestra.
Wait, okay, sorry. So we could see it originally, but now I see like a blue, like, does anyone else see
the Christopher
Same
Dackett
thing
thing from
here.
earlier is back again.
Oh.
It's completely blacked out now. It might be the Zoom window because I saw you had it open.
Huh. I was afraid because I need my notes. Hang on. Okay, let me see. Let me see if I can do it a different way. Okay, now can you see everything?
Yep.
Okay, hang on. But now I can't see my notes. So hang on a second. All right, I'll open my notes in a different. Um, all right. Um, okay. All right, I'm ready. So Appalachian Spring is probably one of my favorite pieces for a number of reasons, but I've also done this piece, along with Firebird Suite and Beethoven 5 is probably my most performed work in terms of my experience. When I was the assistant conductor with the Louisiana Philharmonic, I had to I got the privilege of conducting this piece for our young people's concert, and that meant doing it 26 times for different performances. So, and then I also had a chance to do a complete ballet version as well, and so that ballet run was about 35 performances. So it wasn't with with the Martha Graham Dance Company or anything. It was a local company in Louisiana, but that was a really interesting experience because I got to see the work, to see the comparison of the different versions. We'll talk about in a second. All right, so I'll go into a little bit of the history, and much of this presentation is going to hinge on the genesis and the collaborators that made this possible. I'm actually going to leave a lot of resources for you to do the score study portion. I'll go into some aspect of score study, but today's mainly historical context of how the piece came to be. All right. Appalachian Spring was premiered on October 30, 1944. It was a one-act ballet, and the story is set in rural Pennsylvania during the 19th century, and it's about a newlywed and building their first farmhouse, and it's evoking somehow simpler times. And as you can imagine, 1944, it's U.S. is in the midst of World War II. And so it's many things that surround the creation of this ballet. If it wasn't for, of course, Copland and Martha Graham, the piece would not have been birthed. But there are actually people, a couple people who are involved with the creation of this that plays a key role. And one of them is Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge, who was a benefactor for the Library of Congress, and she in fact funded the creation of the Coolidge Auditorium. But she played a really pivotal role in the commission of this piece. And also Harold Spivak, who was the library's music division chief at the time. He really also played a central role in convincing Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge to commission the piece. She was initially afraid that the funding that she had wasn't going to be enough to commission a major composer. The budget they were thinking about was $500, and she was not sure that that would be actually enough money to commission somebody of stature of Copland. And in fact, there were two other composers, Darius Milhaud and William Schumann, not Robert Schumann, William Schumann, who were being considered and pursued to be commissioned. But it turned out William Schumann and Darius Milhaud basically turned both of them down because they deemed it as too cheap. But Copland went ahead and agreed to write the piece. So here you see the letter that Martha Graham wrote to Aaron Copland on July 22, 1943. It's too small to read, I think, but yeah, I'll send this link to you guys later on. So if you want to look at it, and this is Copland. And one of the things that's really eye-opening is sometimes we think of creating a piece of work as being really just limited to the domain of composers and perhaps a librettist if it's an opera or a choreographer in this case. But it was really Elizabeth Coolidge who played a central role in convincing both parties to come together. And even though the commissioning fee was very low, she played kind of this introduction of introducing Martha Graham to Aaron Copland, and they in turn became quite close to each other. This is Martha Graham in the original production. And in fact, later on in the notes, I actually provided links to the original performance, which is in black and white, but it was only available to researchers for a long time. But I've also put that in the link. So Martha Graham came to prominence in the 1930s as a director, and she was a principal dancer of her own company. And from 1934 on, she was known as the mother of modern dance. And she was, in fact, sort of a pioneer, because most dance companies would choreograph to music that's already existing, right? So Nutcracker being the staple diet of most dance companies. But Martha Graham really relied on almost entirely on original scores written for her dancers. So this was a departure in how dance companies were interacting with music, right? So if you take any sort of ballet company in America, they sell out Nutcracker, and that becomes the backbone of their financial structure, right? Because everybody wants to see the Nutcracker. And so many of the dance companies relied on choreographing to pre-existing works in the canon, right? But as a modern dance company, Martha Graham was really the one to push and find and collaborate composers to write original music for her dance productions. So this was really a different way of doing things. So, and when they say she was the mother of modern dance, Merce Cunningham was the preacher in this production, and Merce Cunningham goes on to find his own company and goes on to commission many composers to write music, including John Cage. So you can really say Martha Graham affected not only modern dance, but in some ways she was the mother of many American composers, because it created a playing field for composers to create works for ballet. All right. Nope, I went too far. Yeah. So this is, of course, Copland. This picture is actually from 1946, so it's a little bit after he had written the piece. But by early 1940s, Copland was basically regarded as the dean of American composers, was the phrase that was used to describe him. And he wrote in so many different genres, including Lincoln Portrait, El Salon Mexico, Billy the Kid, Rodeo. So he was, and the Red Pony, and there are a couple of film scores, but like Bernstein, he shied after a couple experiences with film scores where he realized, as a composer writing for film, you were not really in the driver's seat. So after those two disastrous experiences, On the Waterfront for Bernstein was an amazing score, but there is footage of Bernstein being interviewed where he basically was so upset with how his music was treated by the filmmaker that he actually goes on to create a suite that had, in a way, nothing to do with the original film score. But basically, Mrs. Coolidge contacts Copland in that letter, and she asks him to write this piece for Martha Graham. And after having attended Martha's performances, Copland is convinced that he really wants to collaborate with this the grande dame of the modern ballet. All right. Here's this is just like, this is actually a very annoying video. So I'm actually cutting out the first minute and a half because the interviewer, like myself, was just talking way more than Copland. But basically Copland was asked about the idea about Appalachian Spring. And so let's hear him talk about Appalachian Spring.
Well, it's proven so.
I've often been amused because after a performance, someone's come up to me and said more than once, when I hear your music and see that ballet, I can just see the Appalachians and feel spring. And the odd thing is that when I wrote the music for Martha, and after she giving me her sort of libretto for the ballet, it had no title. So I had no idea it was going to be called Appalachian Spring. I was really putting Martha to music. The ballet would not have been the same if it had been written for somebody else.
The woman dancing there is Martha Graham.
Somehow or other, Martha Graham, by personality, suggests a kind of Shakerism. I couldn't tell you exactly why. There's something rather prim about her.
That person is Eric Hawk.
I can't any longer remember how I got hold of a whole
plays the role
volume
of
of
husband.
Shaker melodies
Yeah.
and dances, but it was quite a find when I happened on it. It's a strange thing about folk materials, you know. I can sometimes get to know one and I think, gee, that's a good tune, but I could never do anything with it. On the other hand, I'll get to know out of a book some tune, and immediately I have a sort of a natural impulse to do something about it. I've never been able to analyze what controls the lack of interest, but it is a spontaneous thing, so that I feel very clever to have combined Martha and Shaker tunes. It needn't necessarily have happened. I could have written her a whole ballet score without any Shaker tunes, but it's one of those lucky things that you congratulate yourself with later on.
I can't tell you what it's meant to all of us to be able to be here today. And inasmuch as you've been able to tell us about your sharing with Martha Graham, Appalachian Spring, would you allow us to ask you one more kindness? Would you play a passage from Appalachian Spring?
Well, I could try it. I haven't played Appalachian Spring myself at the piano in a long time, and it wasn't written for piano, but I'll take a chance.
Voice of the master. That's what we want.
This is the way the ballet ends.
So the whole piece actually is built on that two overlaid chords, and they usually call it this Appalachian polychord. So it's basically an A major chord, and then there's a E major in first inversion overlaid, which is how the piece ends and how it begins. And so he basically takes traditional harmony and basically two triadic chords that it shouldn't be dissonant, or it shouldn't be unusual. But by overlaying each other in equidistant, it makes the chord lose its traditional function. So the seventh scale degree doesn't sound like a leading tone. So because they're all equidistant from each other, right, having two major chords and one in an inversion next to each other, it provides the stasis where it's the forward momentum of the harmonic progression is no longer there. It's sort of this stasis. So out of that, he creates this whole piece. That's a harmonic field. So that's something you should look into of how the piece is built as well. All right, let me go to the next slide.
Well, it's proven so.
Of course, this is the phrase where Appalachian Spring comes from. It's from the Hart Crane, who is pictured right here on the right side. I actually don't know what the date of that photo is. I'm hoping that's close to when he wrote the poem, The Dance. The poem, obviously, "Oh, Appalachian Spring, I gained the ledge, steep, inaccessible smile that eastward bends and northward reaches in that violet wedge of Adirondacks." So that's the inspiration from which Martha drew the inspiration for the synopsis. And then she gave that synopsis to Copland. In fact, the original title is not Appalachian Spring. It was a Ballet for Martha. So of course that's what it was. Copland was talking about in terms of when people ask about Appalachian Spring and they see Appalachian Spring, that really had no basis when Copland was creating this piece. All right. This picture on the left is the Coolidge Auditorium in the Library of Congress. That's where the premiere took place. On that evening, there were two other composers that were presented. The reason the ballet exists in a couple different versions. So there's the version we're doing is the 13 instrument ballet suite. So it is not the complete ballet. Complete ballet is about 45 minutes or so. The suite version is about 23 minutes or so. And so, but it is the original instrumentation of two violins, two second violins, two violas, two cellos, one bass, flute, clarinet, bassoon, and piano. All right, that's the original instrumentation, even in the complete ballet version. Right, and then later, Copland created, because it was so successful, first the suite version, right? So he deleted all the sort of transitional music that adheres to the unfolding of the ballet. So he made a suite version with the original instrumentation, and then he made a full orchestra version, which is how most of us encounter the piece in our lives. The original instrumentation is caused by the fact that Elizabeth Coolidge was a lover of chamber music, and she in fact wanted something as close to chamber music as possible. So in fact, this piece is done often without conductor, and is small enough. If you have those 13 instrument forces, it could be done without conductor. I always find this issue of conductor versus conductorless orchestras, it's a matter of time, right? If we had more time, then I think I would love to rehearse and coach this piece in a conductorless version, because often orchestra players find when they have to take initiative of not only their own parts, but really knowing the entire score and what everybody else is doing, that experience is richer. Right? So with the chamber orchestra in the past, I've always asked the orchestra to learn at least one piece on a concert that is without conductor. Because there are a lot of new insights you gain if you're not sort of in that sort of chicken zone, a chicken view of the part, and you're only locked into your own part, but you're actually listening across to what everybody else has in the orchestra. And I think that experience is much fuller, right? So when you're making chamber music, when you're making music in general, I think it's a good idea to have the ears opened up to hear what else is happening in the orchestra, right? So when you're learning these pieces in your part, play along with the recording and listen to different recordings, but take the time to really know what is happening in the other part of the orchestra as you're learning your own part. Okay. All right. A couple more slides. As I mentioned, Eric Hawkins, who played the role of husbandman, was actually Martha Graham's husband. And Merce Cunningham played the fire and brimstone preacher, who later goes on to find his own modern dance company. On the same night of the concert, or the premiere, the other two composers represented was Paul Hindemith and Darius Milhaud. So although Milhaud didn't declined on the commission, he was represented on that same concert. So Copland's score goes on to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music in 1945. And that same year, he basically makes an orchestral suite of the music for full orchestra. He makes an orchestral suite, which is deletion of the rest of the sort of transitional ballet music for the same instrumentation. And then in 1954, he creates a full symphonic version of the suite. And in fact, all three versions of the score are in rotation. In fact, University of Michigan recently did a critical edition of the complete ballet, because it was the complete ballet was thought to be lost. But they found all the parts, and musicologists in Michigan spent time putting together the complete ballet version. So that one is available as well. All right. Next slide is now this footage of the original production. This is not a this is actually Martha Graham, Eric Hawkins, Merce Cunningham in the original principal roles in the original production. And for a long time, this was not available to the general public. But thanks to YouTube, but actually Dance on Film is the one that's put these on. And it is an amazing resource. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, but just to give you a sense of the integration of movement and music. So if you listen to the piece and you've only learned the piece without the context of the ballet, there are many places in the early part of the piece where there are these empty bars, they're silences, right? And so I always thought that just seemed random, why there are these empty bars. But in fact, I'll play the first part where you can actually see the dancers make sounds and rhythmic sounds that fills in those empty spaces. There's the preacher. Eric Hawkins. So I'll stop the video, but I would really encourage you to take the score and your parts and follow along and make notations as to what's happening in the actual choreography, right? Because I think in understanding music, there's always foreground and background, right? So in that section, there's a particular musical gesture that is tied to Martha Graham's movement. That figure is all the maidens running around. So I think it's actually very useful to know what that initial relationship to choreography and the music was. All right, I'll go on. So the entire ballet is available, which is really fantastic. How do I? There we go. So part 1, 2, 3, 4 are available to you. And then basically I've kind of put down the different synopses. This is basically what Copland received from Martha Graham, right? And in fact, it's in 14... there we go. 14 different description of the movement. So imagine you're Copland, right? Aaron Copland, and you receive this sets of synopsis. Very slowly, introduction of characters one by one in suffused light. I think if it was a lesser composer, maybe suffused light meant something else, right? So I think it's really fascinating to have this original directions that Martha Graham gave to Copland, and he based this synopsis by which he created the music. Next is I might not play the whole thing, but it's such a rare video of Martha Graham, and she's talking about the craft of ballet and dancing, but I find this to be actually quite useful when thinking about music that accompanies her choreography.
They say that dance and architecture are the two primary arts. That means that you have to have the gesture, the effort, the real effort to communicate with another being, and you must also have a tree to shelter under in case of storm or sun. But the life of a dancer is by no means simple. It's short, comparatively. I'm not an example of that, but I can see that I could not do beyond a certain time certain things. The legs are not suited to that. It takes about 10 years to make a dancer. The body should be pliable to start with, and it should be eager, and it should realize what technique is, what St. Augustine calls the regality of order, which is every time the hand comes up or the foot comes up to a certain level, it should come up exactly that same way the next time, 50 times out of 50. In order to do that, it takes endless training, it takes sorrow, it takes joy, and it takes infinite weariness. But those are part of the craft and part of the joy of it. And when we speak of dance, we forget that the essential of dance is not in words, but is in movement. Now that movement is embodied in each one of us. Ballet said a wonderful thing about dance at one time to me. He said, Martha, everybody's born with genius, but most people only keep it a few minutes. And I think that is true. If you don't keep that intrinsic capacity, if you don't keep that attention to the slightest wind that blows, you have no place in the dance. I have a tree in my garden in New York, which was a tiny little sprout. It grows outside the barrier of my building at the back. And there's a wire fence, one of those wire twisted fences that is the no man's land, and then comes this little shaft grew up outside that and wanted the light toward the east, so it turned in the direction of the sun. I watched that little plant. Now it has become a great tree. It's almost as tall as a building, 3 stories. It has embraced this fence so that on each side of the wire The wires through the middle. On each side lies the wood of the tree, and each side bears the marks, the tragedy of its passing, and those markings are the markings of the wire fence. In a way,
So I don't know about you, but the way she talks about every gesture having to have infinite meaning, right? And the way the tree grows, the way she thinks about movement, and then especially a comment about everybody has genius for a few moments in their lives, but it's those who keep and the effort of to keep that moment alive is where the moment of inspiration is. I find that really inspiring. So, and Copland certainly found Martha inspiring to write a piece for her. And so I'm really excited for you to discover this music, and hopefully you'll delve deeper into Martha Graham as well. Okay, and
they say that
this resource I'll probably have to show you in person in a different link, but it's basically the resource link for Copland. So please add to it and kind of do a review of three links. Of course, I would really encourage to look at all of the links that are added by everybody. You should be adding at least one link that is unique to everybody else, right? So that does take some looking at what's already there, right? Just as any critical paper, right? You are trying to find resource about Copland's Appalachian Spring that'll be helpful to us in preparation for performance. So you kind of have to know what's on the resource, and then go through and review other resources that people have put on. And this is another great resource. It's from the New York Philharmonic Digital Archive, if you haven't already discovered it. So basically, the Leonard Bernstein estate donated many scores. This particular piece the score is marked by Eric Leinsdorf. But if you go to the score, you can actually not only look at the score in terms of what's on the page, but actually you can go deeper and look at here, let me just bring this up a little bit. The markings of the conductor, right? So in this case, there aren't too many markings because Leinsdorf was of the German tradition, and for some reason German conductors don't like to mark the score. But more interesting is is the parts. So you can actually go into every single part in the orchestra. So if you're a string player and you're wondering, I wonder what fingerings they used or what bowing they used, you can actually look up the New York Philharmonic bowing and their fingering. Right? So I find that to be a particularly interesting resource to have. If you are a clarinetist, you can go to look at the clarinet part. If you're a flutist, you can look at the flute part, and so forth down the road. Okay, so do use that resource. And then this is online score. Now, there is a paywall, but the good news is that it's actually free to make your own account on Boozy and Hawks. I don't know why they collect that information. Maybe they're trying to start charging at one point. But you can actually make an account. I've already did, and it's a free account. So you can actually look at the score online. Now, Brett will make a copy and scan the full score, so it'll be ready for us at a certain later date. But for now, you can look at the score, the full score. So when you have when you're exploring the piece with recordings, you can actually follow along with the score. It's a little laggy. There's also a couple versions. So in the resource list, so that's the Boozy score. Now this one is a scrolling score for full orchestra, which is different than the version that we're doing. Oh, actually, it is the original version. You can actually follow along with the score, with the scrolling score as well. Okay. Let me go back to the presentation. So that's pretty much the end of my historical context presentation, right? This is the chord. Let me just show you this one picture. That's the chord that's overlaid, right? The A major on the bottom, A, C sharp, E, A, and then B, E, G sharp. So the E major chord in first inversion. So that is what creates the Appalachian Spring polychord sound that the whole piece is based on. Okay, I'll open up to questions about the piece, but I was hoping to get this done in under an hour, and I have 5 minutes to spare for questions. I was hoping to have a little more time for Q&As, but I'm willing to stay on and answer questions about the piece and about Copland. You can use the raise your hand feature or just raise your hand. Michael.
Hi, I still have my question about sectionals. Like, where can we find which sectionals are which week?
So the sectional times, I'm actually trying to schedule a bass sectional with Sam Shuan to coach, but his schedule changed a little bit because he was just called for a concert. So I will be posting those times. Probably, I'm hoping to settle all of that by next Tuesday. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Nora.
I just had a quick question about like the music and stuff.
Mhm.
As in, do you expect us to like print our own and then bring it to our rehearsals?
No, so right now, because we just received the parts last Wednesday, so Brett, our librarian, made the scans of all the parts. He's working on making scans of the score. So once the scanning of the score is done, he's gonna start working on actually copying and printing out the physical parts. So you will all have access to the physical parts probably by next week sometime. Okay.
I can also just bring the physical parts to Carmen at our first rehearsal if you don't want to pick them up beforehand, or you can find a way to pick them up before rehearsal as well.
Yeah.
Like practicing wise, we could like find it online and use those to practice, right?
Yeah.
Or okay. Thank you.
So let me show you the link on so for the score and parts, let's see. No, that's the Bernstein link. Yeah, there we go. So here, Brett scanned all of the individual parts, right? So if you go to violin 1, you basically have the violin part and so on. Okay, so I'll put this link in the chat right now so you can access it. Okay. Michael, second question? Oh, no, okay.
I forgot to put my hand down.
What else? One sort of wrinkle is that we may be looking for a clarinetist because our clarinetist who was assigned to the part, Jae-hoon, he's been quarantined right now because he tested positive for COVID. So facilities is probably not going to clear him to be in person with us. So I have to try to figure out what that means. So I'll give everybody an update once I know what's happening. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. I will post the sectional schedule as soon as I have the confirmation from the coaches. And utilize the resource list, right? Listen to pieces. Don't listen to just one version, listen to several versions, right? Oftentimes, when I was a young conductor or a young musician, I often would gravitate towards a recording, and then that sort of became imprinted on my mind as the way to play a particular piece, right? So my parents had this recording of Raphael Kubelik and the Czech Republic playing the Dvorak 9th Symphony. And that's a piece I just grew up on. It was on all the time because it was one of my dad's favorite pieces. It was just on all the time in our record player. And so years later, when I was assigned to play the piece, and I was actually looking at the music, and I realized, what is this? Why does it look different? And so, for example, in one of the places, the horn has this thing. It's a 64th note pickup. Ta-da! That's how it's supposed to be played. But of course, the Raphael Kubelik with the Czech Republic played it this way, bum ba, like that. So I thought that's what it was supposed to be. And so there are many tradition things that have crept into the repertoire, and that's just like outright wrong rhythm, right? And there are times people put in rallentandos that's not in the score, or they get faster. Sometimes when you play Tchaikovsky and you listen, there are very specific places Tchaikovsky puts in directional indication. But in fact, orchestras kind of do whatever they want. When we're doing Tchaik 6 a number of years ago at Cornell, there's this very specific tempo indication that it's like a wave. It goes back and forth, faster and slower and faster and slower. And he prescribes in a very specific way to do that rubato. But of course, when you go try to find a recording of that piece, I basically found, well, how come nobody's doing this direction, right? So what I found was, as I became more involved in score study and learning pieces, and then I would listen to other recordings, and then often I will walk away from listening to a recording going, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is not the way you're supposed to do it, because nobody else is following this direction by the composer. So when you listen to a recording and that becomes the only way by which you learn the piece, there's a danger of learning an interpretation that's actually going against the grain of the wishes of the composer. So always try to start from the page of noticing what's on the page, what the direction is, and then say, okay, if I'm the composer and I gave that direction, how would I make that musical choice? So try to make that choice on your own before allowing somebody else to make that decision for you, because you listen to that recording before really knowing what the score says, right? And in fact, it becomes sort of a great way to converse with interpreters from different time and composers. So you look at a piece of score, you learn the piece on your own, you create the image of the piece in your oral record player in your mind, and you start to make decisions about how you want to interpret the piece, what tempo, how much rallentando, how fast, all of those decisions. Now, once you make a set of decisions, then you go and consult recording and say, oh, that's what Abado and Berlin did in '94. Let's see what Karajan and Vienna did in '63. And you start to go down the list of conductors and interpreters and say, I like what you did there, but I totally disagree because that's not what's in the score. Right? So you get to have this sort of conversation with interpreters. So have fun getting to know the piece. It's a wonderful piece of music. And I look forward to finally being in person rehearsing this piece with you all. Okay? All right. I'm done for today. I'll stay